Hello, English 1022 students. I am here to talk to you a little bit more about rhetoric. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about rhetorical devices that you might start identifying in your primary source that you've chosen for the rhetorical analysis. So I just have a few slides to go through. There are hundreds of rhetorical devices. I break them up into three sections: schemes, tropes, and patterns, sound patterns. Actually, not just sound patterns, but even syntactical patterns. And so probably if you Google search this information, you'll mostly just see schemes and tropes. Schemes usually include patterns, but I like to kind of isolate them from the schemes group just so you can see some different ways of writing. So again, you might start looking for some of these schemes, tropes, and patterns in your primary source. And more important than that, I'm going to try to get you to use some of them this semester. They're not just gimmicks. They're actually a way that writers in academic courses, writers who write creatively, writers who write for a personal reason, pay attention to their expression of ideas, especially on the sentence level. And then also as you're developing paragraphs. That's the famous English teacher word, right? Develop a paragraph. But it really is about developing a paragraph and starting from one sentence and trying to connect those sentences together with these devices. And so there are hundreds of them. I'm going to go over a few of them now. You'll notice that I'm in the same PowerPoint that I was in when I talked about the rhetorical situation. So I'm just down on a slide that we hadn't covered yet. And so just going to spend a few minutes. I'll probably talk pretty fast. So if you need to pause the video, please do that. If you need to rewind and have me say those things again, please do that. And let's get started. So some rhetorical devices. Let's start with schemes. These are definitely patterns. Again, sentence patterns or patterns that you can put into paragraphs. And the first two are sentence examples, asyntodon and polysyntodon. So this is an example of my own. Asyntodon, you will notice that I have, I'm going to see if I can highlight them, but their commas are going to be a little bit challenging to highlight. But notice that I have a comma after each item in my list. I've listed in this sentence. Let me go ahead and read it to you. I love reading, writing, analyzing, making connections. And usually when we make a list, we separate the list with commas. It's always a pretty standard thing that we separate items in a list in our sentence. No matter how many there are, there's usually 3, but there could be 4, 5, 6 items. You see that we usually use commas, and usually we have an and that combines the last two, but not with asyntodon. You drop the and use commas only. Think about the reason why this kind of sentence would happen in a piece of writing. First of all, it's sentence variety. Second, it is going to speed up the sentence. So if the list is longer, then this would be a really great construction for your sentence, because then you can list a bunch of things and not have that slower end with the and. So it really does speed up the reading. When a reader is reading a list and there's commas, a comma after every item, it speeds up the sentence for the reader. Polysyntodon is the opposite. It is no use of commas and use of the conjunction and. So you see in this sentence that I've used the same sentence. I love reading and writing and analyzing and making connections. And so that and is in place of the comma, no commas at all, and does the opposite. It slows the sentence down. So think about why a writer might want to do that, might want to speed up the pace of the sentence, slow down the pace of the sentence. I think this is a great time for me to say, rhetoric is used in writing, in creative writing, in academic writing and personal writing. You've heard me say that already in this presentation, so not a bad idea for me to repeat it. It's also used in public speaking. And we can see how asyntodon and polysyntodon would really play into speeding up a part of the speech, listing out a lot of information, slowing down something near the end of a speech to really have your reader linger over an idea or a list of things. So these, I think, make a lot of sense for you all in terms of public speaking. And when we study rhetoric, we usually are studying really powerful orators who just come by these skills naturally. It's a talent. It's a beautiful talent that they have, and we can find when they're doing it. But they do it kind of naturally because, you know, when they're speaking, they want to engage the listener. But we can use these exact same strategies in our writing. Let's do a few more. Anaphora and epiphora are opposites as well. Anaphora is repetition at the beginning of sentences. So you see, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. You all know where that comes from. It comes from the Gettysburg Address. That, gosh, I think it's like 260 words. I can't remember the exact number, but it's around that number. Full of rhetorical schemes and tropes, just jam-packed. So that's a line you've heard before. Anaphora, repetition at the beginning of sentences. And why would you use anaphora? Again, to grab the listener or the reader's attention. They're going to pick up on the repetition and make a very important, probably truthful assumption that you want them to pay attention to that particular sentence. Epiphora is the opposite, where we have repetition at the end of the sentence. So you're also familiar with this from the Gettysburg Address, this line, and that government by the people, of the people, sorry, I have the wrong preposition here, and for the people. So people being at the end of the line, again, repetition at the end of a clause or sentences. You see in both of these examples, anaphora and epiphora, that we have clauses, sentence clauses connected together with commas. You could also do this with short sentences, with periods as well. Parallelism is repetition of a grammatical feature of a sentence. And what I mean by that, and when I say see above, what I mean by that is usually if I have a sentence that is going to use prepositions, so prepositions like by, of, for, I'm going to keep that grammatical pattern going, use the same grammatical pattern in each part of the list or in each part of the sentence. This can happen with prepositions. This can happen with verbs in an ing form. This can happen with verbs that maybe you want to keep in past tense. And so all the verbs are in the same tense throughout the list. So parallelism is matching up grammatical structures, grammatical features, grammatical rules, to be honest, within a sentence, usually in a list. And all of the items in that list must match that same grammatical setup that you've chosen as the writer. So that's why I said see above for that one, because gosh, Lincoln again had epiphora and parallelism happening at the same time. I'm trying to get rid of that silly little box. I think I just achieved my goal. All right, climax is related to parallelism, but it has to do with either the order of a sentence, I would say probably a longer sentence, or the order of ideas in a paragraph. So climax is putting the order of ideas from least to most important, ending with the most intense idea at the end, and sometimes can include repetition of the words from one start of the clause to the next. So I'm going to move to a website that I hope that you all will take a look at. I have a couple of examples I'm going to show you. So let me find them. Yep, here we go. I just wanted to show you what I meant by there might be repetition in the sentences with certain words, so you can just kind of eyeball this underlined sentence, the underlined parts of this sentence here, where some of the words get pulled into the next part of the sentence. So climax is happening here, least important to most important idea, order of idea, but also some repetition of words, so you can see how that looks. So I'm going to put, it won't let me go to the top of the page. The name of this website is called Silva Rhetorica. You see the website address here. I'm going to put it in D2L so you all can look up some different rhetorical devices. This is the best website. It's supported by Brigham Young University, and gosh, you can look up everything here and get great definitions and examples as well. So wanted to show you that. And one more, because I can't go through every scheme because there's, again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. Antithesis, you've probably heard of this word. Sometimes you'll hear it pronounced antithesis, which isn't really how it's spoken, but antithesis is putting two ideas together to show the difference, which is what a juxtaposition is, you know, a comparison of two things that are different. And sometimes it can be related to parallelism, that it might, these ideas might be in the same grammatical structure. They're not usually presented as opposites or as a contrast with different structures, because it kind of ruins the rhythm of it, and you know, it doesn't feel like such a piece of, it doesn't feel like an artistic move in a piece of writing or an artistic move in a speech to have that parallelism not happening. So you've heard of antithesis before, I'm sure. All right, so we went through some schemes. The next lists are much, much shorter because I just want to get through a few examples here. So allusions are a trope. Tropes are usually about something in the writing providing more meaning. The reader is able to interpret a meaning. And so with schemes, it's more about, you know, repetition or some kind of comparison, but to show opposites, usually on a sentence level. And then tropes are sometimes also just in a couple of sentences, but can be more extended than that as well. An allusion is usually a reference to a person, a place, a thing, something in history, a piece of literature. The thing is referenced, it's named in the writing. It's not usually defined, it's not usually described, it's just named. It's like kind of like name dropping, where you're just supposed to know what it means. And then the allusion obviously gives more meaning to the piece of writing because it's referenced. So, you know, making an allusion to a piece of literature might help your writing to take on some of the qualities of that piece of literature, or the meaning of some of that literature. Metaphor and simile, as you know, is a comparison of one thing to another thing, so that the first thing named takes on the qualities of the second thing named. Metaphors are sometimes a little harder for people to pick up on. They can take place within nouns, within verbs, and similes are easier to identify because we have the like and the as, and we can see the comparison is very obvious. And then connotation is when you are using words that suggest other meanings that you aren't actually saying. So denotation is the act in writing where a word actually means what you mean it to mean. You know, the dictionary definition, there's no extra meaning associated with it. And connotation has a suggestion to it, right? We can look at a sentence, or we can look at a specific word that maybe is repeated a few times and understand that not only does it carry the dictionary definition or the definition that most people understand about the word or the idea, but it has an extra suggested meaning as well. There are many other tropes, but those are some simple ones to get us started for the semester. All right, and I'm going to end today with patterns of sound, which usually, again, would fit into the schemes category, but I wanted to call attention to them because I think they are under-recognized. I think writers use them a lot more than we notice. We notice it in poetry for sure, because in poetry we're looking for music. But in essay writing, we're not always looking for music, even though, gosh, we should be. Essay writing should be just as beautiful, and I think it often is just as beautiful as writing poetry. So alliteration, you probably remember learning this as a younger person, but let's go ahead and review. Alliteration is use of consonant sounds. It really can be repetition of any sounds, but we use assonance to help us to understand that vowel sounds are separate from consonant sounds. So alliteration would be, you know, maybe repetition of a B sound with several words with B's in it, and assonance would be words within a sentence, and let's say there are O sounds and lots of O sounds, and so that would draw our attention as the reader to the sentence that has these sounds that keep repeating. Sibilance is repetition of sounds that sound like a hiss or a hush maybe, but probably more of a hiss. So S's, TH's, SH's, Z's, V's. Gosh, it's making me think of all the fricatives, right? If you've studied how we speak language in the mouth, a lot of the fricative sounds relate to sibilants. So I have an example of sibilants that I want to show you real quick, and it's in the, oh shoot, I gotta go to my browser and I went past it. I'm sorry, y'all are watching me go through all of my different apps there, but I have fleeing to the mountains pulled up in D2L, and I want you all to see this second to last sentence. Flee to the mountains, deserts, and babbling brooks to get in touch with wild spaces. I noticed this the first time I read it. I heard all these S sounds at the ends of the words mountains, deserts, brooks, and spaces, and it really grabbed my attention, and it's in the conclusion too. I mean, gosh, we all complain about how blah and boring our conclusions can be. Why not try something like using a sound pattern in the conclusion to grab somebody's attention as we're kind of repeating our main point, right? So that's a great use of sibilants there. And then back to the PowerPoint, and then rhyme. Again, want to say we anticipate rhyme in poetry, but sometimes you can have a quick rhyme in a sentence, in a pair of sentences. You know, sometimes rhymes come off as cute and clever, and I don't really think that's what we're going for in essay writing, although if that matches your tone, then maybe it is. But, you know, rhyme might be a really cool way of grabbing your reader's attention. So I think we've covered all the devices. I want you to know, not all of them, gosh, it would have taken me hours to make this video, but y'all, want you to know that in the coming weeks, I'll ask you to maybe look up a few other ones, define a few other ones, just so you can be on the lookout for where you might be able to fit rhetorical devices into your own writing. And so we covered some schemes, some tropes, and some patterns of sound. And gosh, if you have any questions, let me know. One last thing I'll say is that the textbook has a fantastic chapter on style that talks about trope schemes and sentence variety, sentence types. So you might even want to take a peek at some other tropes and schemes that the textbook talks about. There might be a little repetition there from what I've presented, but there are some others that I haven't defined in this presentation as well. So take a peek. Maybe I'll pop those page numbers into the discussion board this week, that questions and ideas discussion board, so you can check out the page numbers there. All right, y'all, take care. Talk to you soon.